Barely 48 hours after the wedding, my new son-in-law appeared at my house with a notary. "We've just sold this place. You're being moved to an assisted living facility." His arrogant smirk suggested an easy win against an old man, but I responded calmly, "Excellent. Let's make a stop at the police department first. They're quite eager to review what I sent them about you." My words changed the entire situation. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Arthur, Claire, and I need our own home to properly begin our lives together. Victor leaned in, the restaurant's soft lighting reflecting in his wine glass. "Your house is ideal for a young family." The suggestion felt like a bucket of cold water. I put my fork down, the lingering sweetness of the wedding cake on my tongue turning sour. We had just celebrated their union 2 days prior. And now this. "Victor, that is my home." My tone remained steady, but my fingers gripped the table's edge. "I built it myself 25 years ago." Claire fidgeted between us, her new ring glinting in the candlelight. The private booth at the Willow Creek Bistro suddenly felt claustrophobic. Patrons at other tables laughed, unaware of the grenade that had just been detonated at ours. But you're only one person in such a big house. Victor's smile was unwavering. "It isn't practical." "And at your age, wouldn't you be more comfortable somewhere more manageable?" At my age? 67 wasn't decrepit, but Victor's words implied I was knocking on death's door. The champagne glass shivered in my hand. "We'd take wonderful care of it," he pressed on, reaching to pat Claire's hand. "Just imagine, your future grandchildren playing in those very rooms." Claire's gaze shifted between us. "Dad, Victor, please, let's not argue. This is meant to be a joyful time." Joyful? I had just written a $20,000 check for their wedding reception. The flowers from the event were still wilting in a vase on our table, their petals browning. "Victor," I said, sitting up straighter, "at my age, I am perfectly capable of making decisions about my own assets. You can stay with me for a short time while you look for your own place." His confident look faltered. For a split second, a chilling coldness appeared in his eyes before the charming facade returned. "Of course, Arthur, I fully understand." But his tone had a new, sharp edge. "It's just that with rental costs today and Claire's salary as a teacher—" "We'll be fine, darling," Claire said, squeezing his hand. But I detected the anxiety in her voice. She had always struggled financially. Victor's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. "I was just hoping we could handle this as a family. What is the benefit of you holding on to a valuable property when it could help us all?" A valuable property? Not my home, not the house where I had carried my wife Eleanor across the threshold, where Claire took her first steps, where Eleanor lived out her final days. An asset. The ambient jazz music now felt like a mockery. Couples at adjacent tables whispered intimately while mine was fracturing in real time. A waiter drifted by, topping off water glasses with professional invisibility. "Mike." The answer is no. Each word was delivered with more force than the last. "Find your own home." Victor leaned back, his smile becoming fragile. "Well, we can certainly revisit this when everyone's emotions have settled." Emotions? As if my desire to keep my own house was some irrational whim. Claire's expression crumpled. "Perhaps we should leave." Leave? She meant my home, where they had been staying since they returned from their honeymoon, where Victor had already begun inquiring about the plumbing, property taxes, and local real estate values. I shoved my chair back, my napkin drifting to the floor. The other diners became a blur as blood roared in my ears. "Arthur, wait." Claire half stood, but I was already on my feet, pulling my wallet from my coat. 2 $50 bills landed on the table with unnecessary force. "Cover the bill," I said. "I'm getting some air." Victor's voice trailed after me as I walked away. "We can discuss this later, Arthur, once you've had a chance to think rationally." The restaurant's heat pressed against me as I headed for the home exit, every step taking me further from my daughter's desperate eyes and my son-in-law's scheming grin. The host gave a polite nod, completely unaware that my entire world had just been upended. Outside, the June air was sharp against my face. I searched for my car keys, my hands shaking from more than just the chill. The drive was silent, Claire's worried looks in the rearview mirror weighing on my conscience. By the time I reached my driveway, my tie felt like it was strangling me. Inside, I loosened the silk knot and poured a generous measure of whiskey. The study's familiar shadows enveloped me, the leather chair molded to my form, bookshelves filled with 35 years of collected knowledge. Photos of Eleanor smiled from the corner of the desk. I collapsed into the chair with a sigh. Outside, streetlights cast geometric shadows on my lawn, my house. The sheer nerve of his demand was still breathtaking. $20,000. I wrote that check without a second thought, watching Claire's face illuminate as she detailed her dream wedding. The reception hall, the string ensemble, the extravagant floral displays that cost more than a small car, all to ensure my daughter had a perfect day. Now her husband wanted my home as well. I took out my phone and scrolled through wedding pictures from 2 days before. Victor cutting the cake, his hand over Claire's on the knife. Victor dancing with my daughter, spinning her until she giggled. Victor shaking my hand, calling me Dad for the first time. Was he already scheming back then? The whiskey burned, but not as intensely as the memory of Victor's smile when I refused him, as if he anticipated my resistance, as if it was all part of a larger strategy. My hand found the desk drawer and pulled out the leather-bound journal Eleanor had given me when I retired from architecture. For all those plans still in your head, she had said. June 2024. I wrote the date carefully. Victor Stone demands ownership of house during celebration dinner, cites practicality and my age repeatedly. Claire is uneasy, but sides with her husband. The pen felt heavy. What kind of person does that? 2 days after a wedding I financed. He wants my home, not to purchase it, not to sell and divide the money. He wants it handed over, as if I were some senile old man ready for a nursing home. I put the pen down and walked to the window. The street was quiet. Porch lights glowed, and televisions flickered in living rooms. Normal families leading normal lives, not contending with sons-in-law who talked about valuable properties over a wedding cake. Back at my desk, I opened my laptop. Bank accounts, property deeds, insurance policies, numbers that represented a life of careful work. The house was worth $500,000, perhaps more in the current market. My pension and savings could support me for another 2 decades, maybe 3 if I was frugal. Victor somehow knew all of this. His questions during their engagement had seemed innocent then, just a future son-in-law taking an interest in the family. Now they felt like intelligence gathering. What are your property taxes like, Arthur? This area must have excellent appreciation. Have you thought about what you'll eventually do with all this space? I had answered him openly, proud of my financial security, proud to show Claire's fiancé that she came from a stable home. Eleanor's photo caught the lamplight, her eyes seeming to watch me. What would she have made of this? She was always a better judge of character than I was, better at seeing hidden agendas. Trust, but verify, she often said. People will show you their true colors if you just pay attention. I had been too swept up in Claire's happiness to pay close attention, too thankful she had found someone after her divorce 3 years ago, too relieved she seemed so happy and stable. The journal was open, waiting. I picked up the pen again. Victor Stone, 38, business strategist, claims to assist small businesses with efficiency, works remotely, travels for clients, has never named specific companies or shown in-depth business knowledge. The more I wrote, the more I questioned. What did Victor actually do? I'd never seen him go to a real office, never heard him on a business call at the house. His income seemed sufficient but not extraordinary, yet he'd proposed with a 2-carat ring that must have been worth $25,000. I closed the journal and picked up my phone. Tomorrow, I would start asking questions, starting with Marcus Vance. My lawyer had managed Eleanor's estate, was familiar with my finances, and understood the need for discretion. Something was very wrong with Victor Stone, very wrong indeed. The grocery bags felt unusually heavy as I pulled into my driveway on Thursday. 2 nights of fitful sleep since the restaurant incident had left me exhausted. Every shadow felt like a new threat to my tranquility. Carl Jensen straightened up from his garden as I got out of the car, his weathered face etched with the look of a man bearing important news. "Arthur," he said, crossing from his yard to mine with urgency, "I need to share something with you." I placed the groceries on the hood of my car. Carl's past as a police officer was evident in his serious demeanor. "What is it?" "Yesterday afternoon, Victor had a visitor at your house." Carl glanced at my front door and then back at me. A man in a suit, carrying a briefcase and some kind of measuring tool. My blood ran cold. What were they doing? They were walking the perimeter, taking measurements, snapping photos. The man was noting everything down. Carl's eyes narrowed. It looked like a professional appraisal to me. A very thorough one. The groceries were suddenly the least of my concerns. How long were they here? About an hour, maybe a bit more. Victor had a key. He let the man inside, too. Carl's expression made it clear he knew what this meant. The man spent a lot of time in your backyard, measured the property line, took photos of the foundation. My hands balled into fists. I assumed you knew. If not, I would have called right away. Thank you, Carl. This is critical information. I grabbed the bags with trembling hands. Extremely critical. Inside, I left the groceries on the counter and headed straight for my study. The computer seemed to take an eternity to start, each second dragging on as my mind raced through the possibilities. Browser history. If Victor used my computer, he would have left a trail. The search history loaded, confirming my worst fears. On Wednesday afternoon, while I was at the hardware store, someone had been busy researching property appraisers, Seattle suburbs, real estate assessment services, fast house sale companies, cash for residential properties. Each search query was like a punch to the gut. I scrolled further. Legal requirements property transfer Washington, power of attorney reals, estate, elderly homeowner assistance. My hands shook as I clicked on the visited sites. Professional appraisal companies, firms promising quick cash sales, law offices specializing in property transfers for senior citizens. Victor hadn't just brought an appraiser. He had researched the entire process of taking my house from me. The chair groaned as I leaned back, trying to grasp the scale of his deceit. This wasn't a spontaneous idea over dinner. This was a premeditated plan, likely in motion for months. I thought back to their engagement, Victor's casual questions about my finances, his interest in my daily schedule. Had he been sizing me up as a target all along? My phone buzzed. It was a text from Claire. "Dad, are you feeling any better? Victor said you seemed upset the other night. Maybe we can all talk this evening." Talk. Victor wanted another talk, probably to present his reasonable offer, armed with professional appraisals and legal research. I stared at the screen, the evidence laid bare. With unsteady fingers, I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus. Vance's number. This was more than just wanting my house. This was calculated fraud, and I needed legal help immediately. Marcus Vance, attorney at law. "This is Brenda speaking." My hand shook as I gripped the phone. "Brenda, it's Arthur Mills. I need to speak with Marcus urgently." "He's with a client, Mr. Mills. Can I have him return your call?" "Tell him it's about fraud, real estate fraud." The words felt alien. "Tell him my son-in-law, Victor Stone, is attempting to steal my home." There was a brief pause. "I'll put you through, sir." The hold music felt endless. I paced my study, the browser history on the monitor, glowing like a crime scene. "Arthur." Marcus's voice was filled with immediate concern. Brenda mentioned something about fraud and your son-in-law. Victor Stone. I forced his name out through clenched teeth. He's planning to take my house, Marcus. I have proof he's been researching the legal means to do it. The silence on the other end was too long. Victor Stone, you said? Yes. He married my daughter just 2 days ago, and now he's... Arthur, I need you to listen to me carefully. Marcus's professional tone had sharpened. Let me check something in my files. I heard the click of a keyboard and the rustle of papers, the familiar sounds of Marcus's diligent work. But his tone hinted this was not a routine matter. Arthur, I am currently handling 3 active cases involving a Victor Stone. He specializes in real estate fraud that targets elderly homeowners. The room seemed to spin. Are you telling me he's done this before? His method is consistent. He marries into a family, earns their trust, and then uses forged documents to seize their property. Marcus's voice was now completely clinical, as if he were reading from a report. The victims are always men in their late 60s or 70s recently, widowed with adult children facing financial difficulties. My free hand grasped the desk for stability. But he just married my daughter. That's his exact modus operandi, Arthur. He moves quickly before anyone can react or get legal advice. Papers shuffled again. How much did you know about him? Nothing concrete. He said he was a business strategist, worked from home. The admission felt foolish. We were just so happy Claire had found someone after her divorce. Arthur, you are in imminent danger. Marcus's urgency cut through my shock. Do not sign anything. Do not give him access to any of your financial records. Do not allow him to handle any legal paperwork for you. What do I do about Claire? She has no idea what kind of man she's with. First, we document everything. Then, we secure your assets. Marcus's tone was firm. Your daughter's heart can recover, but your life savings cannot be replaced if they're stolen. I looked at the computer screen at the proof of Victor's research. He brought an appraiser to my house yesterday. He used my computer to look up the legal process. That's his standard procedure. A professional appraisal, forged transfer deeds, a complicit notary to validate everything. Marcus spoke as if reciting from a playbook. Tell me exactly what you've seen. I recounted everything, the demand at the restaurant, the appraiser's visit, the search history, Victor's probing questions. A classic pattern, Marcus confirmed. Arthur, I'm clearing my schedule. Can you be in my office first thing tomorrow? Bring every document you have related to your property, the deed, your will, insurance policies, bank statements. Should I contact the police? Not yet. We need an airtight case first. Marcus's experience was evident. Victor is cunning. He has beaten fraud charges by claiming the victims willingly transferred the property and later suffered from memory issues. The implication was insulting, but I saw the strategy. One more thing, Arthur, Marcus's voice was a warning. Be extremely cautious around him until we meet. If he realizes you're onto him, he might try to accelerate his plan. I hung up and looked at my reflection in the dark window. My son-in-law wasn't just opportunistic. He was a professional predator, and I was his next target. But I hadn't survived 35 years as an architect by backing away from challenges. Tomorrow, Marcus and I would begin to build the case that would end Victor Stone's criminal enterprise. As I reached for my safe, I heard Victor's laughter from the kitchen, and for the first time since the restaurant, I smiled. Let him laugh while he still could. The drive back from Marcus's office seemed longer than usual, his words replaying in my mind. Professional predator, systematic fraud, numerous victims. The descriptions had transformed my son-in-law from a bothersome opportunist into a far more sinister figure. Victor's car was in the driveway when I arrived. Through the window, I saw him and Claire eating dinner, their conversation looking easy and natural. The mundane domestic scene now seemed like a twisted play, now that I knew the truth. I walked in, calling out a casual hello. Victor's voice answered from the kitchen, warm and inviting, asking about my day. The same voice that had demanded my home 3 days earlier. In my study, I locked the door and went to the wall safe hidden behind a portrait of Eleanor. The combination, 82195, our anniversary, had guarded our most vital documents for 2 decades. Inside was the evidence of my life's work. The property deed from 1990, an updated will from 2022, insurance policies, investment portfolios, the very documents Victor needed to steal everything. I laid them all on my desk, examining each with an architect's eye for detail. The house deed, stamped and notarized, worth $500,000. My will, leaving everything to Claire, updated after Eleanor passed away. Bank statements showing a retirement fund that took decades to build. Victor didn't have access to any of this yet, but Marcus's warning echoed. He works fast. From the kitchen, I heard the clatter of dishes being put away, the routine of a normal married couple that concealed Victor's predatory agenda. How many other families had he infiltrated like this? How many other fathers had sat in their studies, realizing too late they had welcomed a wolf into their home? I took out my journal and began to document everything methodically. Every suspicious conversation during their engagement, every inquiry about my finances that had seemed caring but was actually reconnaissance. Arthur, you must get tired rattling around in this big place. Have you considered what you'll do with all this space one day? Claire worries about you being alone. Every comment now had a sinister new meaning, an assessment of my vulnerability, a probe of my attachment to the home, a manipulation of my daughter's love for me. The safe also held Eleanor's jewelry, including her engagement ring, 2 carats, similar to the one Victor had given Claire. Where had a struggling business strategist found $25,000 for a ring? I photographed every document, saving copies, in multiple secure locations. If Victor somehow got his hands on the originals, I would still have proof of ownership. The architect in me valued redundancy and backup plans. My phone rang. It was Claire. "Dad, are you all right? You've been so withdrawn since the wedding dinner." Her voice was filled with genuine concern, the same concern Victor was no doubt exploiting. "I'm fine, honey, just tired." Victor thinks we should all sit down and talk it over, clear the air, or present his forged documents and fake appraisals backed by his meticulous research and professional preparation. "Maybe tomorrow," I said. "Let me get some rest." After the call, I continued my security measures. I changed all my online banking passwords, called my insurance provider to add fraud alerts, and set up a meeting with my financial advisor to discuss asset protection. 3 other families ruined, Marcus had said. 3 other fathers who had trusted their daughter's judgment, who had prioritized family harmony over their gut feelings. But I was not them. 35 years of solving complex problems had taught me to analyze threats, prepare for the worst, and build safeguards. I locked the documents back in the safe and checked the time. 9:30. Victor and Claire were likely settling in, dreaming of their future in my house with my money. Tomorrow the real fight would begin. But tonight I had one more call to make. The bank's fraud prevention hotline answered quickly. "First National Security Department, this is Jennifer. This is Arthur Mills, account number 447291. I need to report suspicious activity involving my son-in-law." As I detailed the situation. To Jennifer, I heard Victor's laughter upstairs and my smile returned. Let him enjoy his last night of feeling untouchable. Tomorrow, his world would begin to unravel, just as he had planned for mine. 3 days of methodical research lay before me as I sat at my computer with my first coffee of the day. Marcus had provided the names of previous victims, and I had 48 hours before our scheduled meeting with the police. Victor was still asleep upstairs with Claire, granting me crucial time to work undisturbed. The first victim was in Miami. Isabella Rossi, 73, whose daughter had married Victor in October. By Christmas, forged papers claimed she had sold her home to a cash buyer for a fraction of its value. I found her on Facebook through her daughter's page. Recent posts depicted a cramped apartment, complaints about rent, and photos of grandchildren she could no longer host. The contrast with her older posts, a spacious home, garden parties, large family gatherings, painted the exact picture Marcus's files had described. Victor's social media told a different story, a professional portrait, photos from business events, glowing testimonials from supposed clients. But a quick check of the dates revealed glaring inconsistencies. Victor claiming to be at a conference in Austin while simultaneously on his honeymoon in Miami with Isabella's daughter. Screenshot by screenshot, I documented every contradiction. His LinkedIn profile listed 3 different business addresses in 18 months. His Facebook relationship history showed he had been married to 4 different women in 2 years. Each relationship followed an identical pattern, a whirlwind romance, a lavish wedding, and immediate concerns about housing. Day 2 was spent making phone calls Marcus had arranged. Isabella Rossi's voice trembled as she recounted her story. "He was so charming at first," she said. "He was worried about my safety, living by myself. He offered to manage my finances to reduce my stress." Her voice was heavy with betrayal. "One morning, he just showed up with a moving truck and eviction notices. He said the house had been sold for my own good." Samuel Lee in Austin told a similar tale. 6 weeks after the wedding, he had documents saying I'd signed over power of attorney. The signature looked just like mine, but I have no memory of signing it. Every conversation exposed Victor's sophisticated network of professional forgers, corrupt notaries, and legal knowledge that made his victims question their own sanity. The emotional toll was also consistent. Adult children who believed their new spouse over their elderly parent, families ripped apart by his calculated deceit. By day 3, I had built a detailed timeline. Victor's method was unvarying. Identify. A target through dating apps or social circles, rapidly court a financially strained adult child, marry within 6 months, raise immediate housing issues, secure professional appraisals, forge documents, and finally reveal that the elderly parent had agreed to sell their home. The most damning piece of evidence came from a deleted social media post I recovered from Google's cache. Posted 2 days after our wedding, Victor had written, "Another successful acquisition. This old man won't know what hit him. #early retirement, #property investment." The post was gone within hours, but I had the screenshot. Victor's arrogance had provided the perfect proof of premeditation. I organized all the information into folders, digital evidence showing timeline discrepancies and multiple identities, testimonials from past victims, documentary proof of forged signatures and fraudulent notarizations, and financial records tracking illicit transactions. Marcus called Wednesday evening. "This is exceptional, Arthur," he said after I sent him my preliminary findings. "Most victims don't piece the pattern together until it's far too late. What's next?" "Tomorrow we meet with Detective Karen Reynolds. She's been tracking Victor for 2 years, but has never had enough evidence to bring charges." Marcus's satisfaction was palpable. "Your research may finally be the breakthrough we need." That night, I reviewed every document, every screenshot, and every victim's statement. 3 days of intense work had turned me from a bewildered homeowner into a proficient investigator. The evidence was undeniable, systematic, and would dismantle Victor's criminal operation. As I was about to close my laptop, one last detail grabbed my attention. Victor's most recent Facebook post from just an hour ago. "Exciting times ahead. Sometimes family means making tough choices for the good of everyone." The timing was chilling. Victor was getting ready to make his move, likely tomorrow, when he believed I would be at my most vulnerable. I saved the screenshot and smiled grimly. Let him come. I was prepared. After 3 grueling days spent at my computer building a case against Victor, I decided the house needed a thorough cleaning. The irony was not lost on me. tidying up my home while preparing to defend it from the man sleeping upstairs with my daughter. As I shifted the coffee table to vacuum underneath, a glint of morning sun caught my eye. A tiny lens, no larger than a button, was tucked behind the ceramic decorative bowl Eleanor had brought back from Spain. My architect's mind immediately flagged the anomaly. This wasn't debris or a lost screw. Someone had planted a camera in my living room. My hand shook as I inspected the device. It was professional grade, motion-activated, and had a micro SD card slot. The installation was clever, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. Victor had been spying on me. The sense of violation was worse than his demand for the house. This was my sanctuary, the place I had mourned Eleanor, made private calls, and planned my investigation. All of it recorded. I resisted the urge to destroy the device. Evidence. This was evidence if I handled it properly. Using a small screwdriver, I carefully removed the micro SD card. My computer took an eternity to read the tiny card, each second stretching out as I braced for what I might find. 47 video files appeared covering the past 2 weeks. The earliest was dated from Victor's third day here. I clicked the first file with a growing sense of dread. My own face appeared, talking on the phone with my insurance agent about a routine policy update. The audio was perfectly clear, the video surprisingly high quality. File after file documented my daily life, morning coffee, watching the evening news, conversations with Marcus about estate planning. Victor had been studying my habits, learning my schedule, likely looking for any information he could exploit. Then I found what he was truly after. File 38 showed Victor himself, standing in my living room while I was out. He was on his phone, speaking with an air of casual confidence. The old man is completely unsuspecting. Victor's voice echoed from my speakers with chilling clarity. By the end of the month, the house will be ours. The paperwork is nearly complete. I paused the video, my heart pounding. Here was Victor, in his own words, admitting his criminal intentions. The conversation continued. Gregory, are you positive? The notary stamps are convincing. Gregory, a name I didn't know, but clearly an associate. These old guys can be unpredictable sometimes, came the reply through Victor's phone. He's just like the others, proud, stubborn, but ultimately naive. Victor's laugh was cruel. He actually paid $20,000 for our wedding. It made looking legitimate so easy. My vision blurred with fury. Every suspicion was confirmed, every fear realized. The recording went on. And the daughter? Claire will never believe her dear old dad over her devoted husband. She's the perfect cover. Perfect cover. My daughter wasn't his wife. She was his alibi. I immediately copied the file, making backups on several drives. This single recording was more valuable than 3 days of research. Victor's own voice, clearly stating his criminal plan, naming his accomplice, and laying out his entire scheme. Gregory Nash, I discovered from other recordings, was the corrupt notary who had validated forged documents for Victor's past victims. Phone calls between them detailed the whole operation: target selection, document forgery, family manipulation, and property seizure. But Victor had made a fatal error. His arrogance led him to discuss his crimes in detail, never imagining his own surveillance would become the evidence against him. I stared at my reflection in the monitor, processing the gravity of my discovery. The camera was meant to give Victor an edge, inside knowledge of my defenses. Instead, his hubris had handed me irrefutable proof of his conspiracy. I closed the laptop and reached for my phone. This changed everything. It was time to stop investigating and start taking action. Detective Karen Reynolds was Marcus's recommendation for cases just like this. As I dialed the police department, I finally felt a shift from defense to offense. Victor's own arrogance was going to be his undoing. The downtown police station was more imposing than I had imagined. I walked through the doors carrying a briefcase containing 3 weeks of evidence against my son-in-law. The hidden camera recordings from the previous day were the final piece of a puzzle I never wanted to assemble. But Detective Karen Reynolds had agreed to see me immediately when I mentioned Victor Stone's name, Mr. Mills. A woman in her 40s approached, her badge clipped to her jacket. "I'm Detective Reynolds. Thanks for coming in." Her handshake was firm and professional, but I saw genuine curiosity in her eyes as she led me to an interview room. "I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting much when you called," she said, motioning for me to sit. "Most elderly fraud victims have very little hard evidence." I placed my briefcase on the metal table with deliberate care. "Detective Reynolds, I spent 35 years as an architect. I believe in thorough documentation." She opened my case file and began to examine the neatly organized folders, her eyebrows gradually rising, social media evidence, victim statements, financial records, and finally, the audio recordings from Victor's own camera. "After reviewing what you brought," she said after 20 minutes of silent study, "I can say this is the most comprehensive case file I've ever seen." Detective Reynolds turned to her computer. "We've been tracking Victor Stone across 3 states for 8 months. He's a person of interest in at least a dozen fraud cases." "A dozen?" The number was staggering. "How is that possible?" "He's very skilled at what he does." Her tone was one of professional frustration. "Victims are often too ashamed to come forward, and the evidence is rarely strong enough for a conviction." She displayed Victor's file, showing me a map dotted with red pins across Washington, Texas, and Florida. Each pin marked a ruined family. "Well, I'm not ashamed," I stated firmly, "and I have more than enough evidence." Detective Reynolds leaned forward, her demeanor shifting from routine to strategic. "Mr. Mills, you could be the key to finally putting this man away, but it would require your direct cooperation in a sting operation." My pulse quickened. "What kind of cooperation?" "We need you to act as if nothing has changed. Let Victor move forward with his plan while we record everything." She watched my reaction closely. "It means allowing him to believe he's winning until we have him on tape committing the crime." The thought of feigning ignorance while Victor plotted against me was unsettling. "You want me to let him think he's succeeding?" "Until we have undeniable proof of criminal intent. Your recordings are fantastic, but we need him attempting the actual fraud in the moment." Detective Reynolds' experience was clear in her methodical plan. "It's the only way to ensure he's convicted." "What about my safety?" "We'll have officers staged around your property. Our response time will be less than 30 seconds. She produced a small device, like a car key fob. A panic button, one press, and backup arrives immediately. I held the device, feeling its solid weight. After weeks of gathering evidence, the idea of finally confronting Victor felt both terrifying and essential. When would this happen? "Based on your recordings, Victor mentioned the end of the month. That gives us a week to prepare." Detective Reynolds began sorting my evidence into official police files. "We'll need to install our own recording equipment, brief the district attorney, and coordinate with our tactical unit." "What about Claire? My daughter doesn't realize who she married." Detective Reynolds' expression softened. "The family dynamic is always the most difficult part. But protecting your daughter means stopping Victor before he can destroy anyone else's family." I thought of Isabella Rossi crying over her stolen home, Samuel Lee hospitalized from the stress, a dozen families shattered by one man's greed. "Detective Reynolds, what do you need from me?" "Everything you've provided today is a perfect foundation." She stood, extending her hand again. "Tomorrow morning, my technical team will be at your house to install surveillance equipment. By tomorrow evening, we'll be ready for whatever Victor Syabot does next." As she walked me out, I felt the weight of the plan. I had 24 hours to prepare for the most critical performance of my life. "Mr. Mills," Detective Reynolds said at the door, "in 15 years, I've never seen a victim turn the tables so completely. Victor Stone has no idea what he's walking into." I drove home knowing my quiet retirement had just become the final act in a criminal's career. The house felt different when I walked in, knowing that in less than 24 hours it would become a crime scene. Detective Reynolds' team was scheduled to arrive at 8 a.m. to install their equipment, and by that evening, every word Victor uttered would be recorded as evidence. I had one night to prepare myself for the performance of a lifetime. Claire and Victor were out, giving me a few precious hours of quiet to process the plan. I sat in my study, surrounded by the evidence that had led me here, trying to visualize tomorrow's confrontation. Victor would present his forged documents with his usual smug confidence. I would have to react naturally, shocked, confused, and slowly defeated. The act had to be convincing enough for him to expose his criminal methods on camera. Morning arrived too soon. At 8 a.m. sharp, 3 unmarked vehicles pulled into my driveway. Detective Reynolds stepped out of the first, followed by technicians carrying cases of equipment. "Mr. Mills, we'll have everything set up within 4 hours," she said, directing her team inside. "After that, we'll run through the plan." I watched, captivated, as the specialists worked with surgical skill. Microscopic cameras were placed throughout my living room and kitchen, each device smaller than a dime and completely hidden. Audio equipment came next, directional microphones capable of capturing a whisper from across the room. "These cameras record in ultra-high definition," the lead technician explained, concealing a lens behind a photo frame. "The audio system automatically filters out ambient noise. Unless Victor is actively searching for surveillance gear, he'll never spot it." Detective Reynolds gave me an earpiece no larger than a hearing aid. "This is a direct line to our monitoring station. We can guide you if needed. Where will you be?" "In a mobile command unit parked down the street. We have officers in the neighboring houses and a backup team 2 blocks away." She showed me a tablet displaying multiple camera feeds from my own home. "Response time will be under 30 seconds if you use the panic button." By noon, the installation was finished. My familiar house had been transformed into a high-tech recording studio, every surface concealing thousands of dollars worth of equipment. "Now we rehearse," Detective Reynolds announced. For 2 hours, we practiced various scenarios. A detective played the role of Victor while I rehearsed natural responses to his manipulative tactics. "Remember, your safety is paramount," Detective Reynolds stressed. "Don't try to corner him. Let him incriminate himself organically. Just be yourself. Be skeptical. Ask the questions any rational person would." "So, Arthur, we need to go over the house transfer documents," the detective said, mimicking Victor's likely approach. "I'm not interested in transferring anything," I responded. "Perfect. Keep your answers natural but firm. The more he has to explain, the more evidence we'll collect." At 3 o'clock, Detective Reynolds ran a final systems check. The earpiece crackled. "Testing, Mr. Mills. Can you hear me?" "Loud and clear." "Excellent. Officers are moving into position." I glanced out my window as neighbors I'd known for decades welcomed visiting relatives into their homes. Carl Jensen gave me a subtle nod from his yard, knowing his house now concealed 2 armed officers. "All systems are go," Detective Reynolds reported. "Cameras are recording, audio is optimal, and communications are active." The house appeared unchanged, but I knew that sophisticated equipment worth more than my car was documenting every sound and movement. At 5 o'clock, Victor's car pulled up. "Showtime, Mr. Mills," Detective Reynolds' voice whispered in my ear. "Remember, we are right here." I touched the panic button in my pocket and watched through the window as Victor walked to my door, carrying a manila envelope that I knew contained forged papers with my name on them. He knocked with cheerful confidence, completely oblivious that his next conversation would be his last as a free man. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 o'clock, and I felt the slight vibration from the device in my pocket, Detective Reynolds' signal that everything was live. Through the window, I saw Victor on my front steps with another man holding a leather briefcase. Both wore the same confident, predatory smiles. This was the moment 3 weeks of investigation had led to. I opened the door with practiced composure. "Victor, and you've brought a guest." "Arthur." Victor's feigned enthusiasm was chilling. "This is Gregory Nash, a licensed notary public. We have some wonderful news about your living arrangements." Gregory Nash looked every bit the part of a corrupt official, middle-aged, overly formal, with a false air of authority. His handshake was cold and clammy. "Mr. Mills." "A true pleasure," Gregory said, his voice oozing insincerity. "Victor has told me all about your unique situation." They made themselves at home in my living room, Victor spreading documents across the coffee table, as if he already owned it. The hidden cameras captured every gesture, every smirk, every calculated move. "Arthur, I have fantastic news," Victor announced, using the same tone he had when he proposed to Claire. "We have just finalized the sale of this house. You'll be moving into a lovely senior community. It's all taken care of." I studied the papers with an architect's precision, admiring the professional quality of the forgeries. "That's fascinating, Victor. To whom exactly did you sell my house?" "A wonderful young family. They paid well over market value." Victor's smile didn't falter. "Gregory has all the official paperwork." Gregory opened his briefcase with a flourish, revealing official-looking stamps, seals, and notarization tools. "Mr. Mills, these documents confirm the completed sale of your property. Everything is legally sound and properly notarized." "I have no recollection of agreeing to sell, Mr. Nash." "Sometimes elderly individuals can forget such important decisions," Gregory replied with practiced condescension. "The documents clearly show your signature and consent." "Perfect." They were walking through the entire fraud scheme on camera, using the exact script Detective Reynolds had anticipated. "Well, this is certainly a surprise," I said, staying in a character as the confused victim. "Perhaps we should drive down to the police station first, just to ensure everything is in order." Victor's confident expression wavered for a fraction of a second. "The police station? Why would we need to do that?" "Because they're very interested in the information I sent them regarding your previous house sales." The temperature in the room plummeted. Victor's face went white, and Gregory fidgeted in his seat. "What? What previous sales?" Victor's voice had lost its confident swagger. "I'm talking about your activities in Miami, Austin, and 3 other cities, Victor. The police have been searching for you for some time." Victor shot to his feet, scattering the forged documents. "You're talking nonsense. Gregory, tell him these papers are completely legitimate." "Victor, what is he talking about?" Gregory's professional facade was crumbling. "You told me this was a clean deal." "I mean that Detective Karen Reynolds has 47 recordings of you discussing your criminal enterprise, Victor." I remained seated, watching their panic escalate, "including your conversations with Gregory about forging notary seals." Gregory turned ashen. "Victor, you said his house was clear. You never mentioned a police investigation." "Shut up, Gregory." Victor snatched up the documents and made for the door. "This old man is delusional. He doesn't know what he's talking about." But the sound of car doors slamming outside stopped him cold. Through the window, unmarked police cars were surrounding my house, officers taking positions at every exit. Victor turned back to me, his predatory confidence replaced by raw fear. "What did you do?" I pressed the panic button in my pocket and said calmly, "I protected my property from criminals, Victor. Something you should have considered before you targeted the wrong architect." The front door flew open, and Detective Reynolds entered, with 3 uniformed officers, their badges glinting in the light. "Victor Stone," she announced with professional satisfaction, "you are under arrest. I'm afraid there's nowhere to—" "Run, Victor." The front door burst open before he could reach it, and Detective Reynolds stepped through with 3 uniformed officers, their badges gleaming under my living room lights. Victor was frozen in the middle of the room, still clutching the forged documents that would now be key evidence against him. "Victor Stone, you're under arrest for fraud. forgery, elder abuse, conspiracy, and operating an interstate criminal enterprise, Detective Reynolds announced, her voice carrying the weight of 15 years on the force. "This is absurd." Victor's composure shattered. "Arthur, tell them this is a family misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding, Victor, was you thinking you could steal my home." I stayed seated, watching justice being served with methodical precision. Gregory Nash had already raised his hands in surrender, his briefcase open, revealing the tools of their illicit trade. "Officers, I want to cooperate," he stammered, his voice trembling. I didn't know about his other crimes. "Mr. Nash, you are also under arrest," Detective Reynolds stated. "Your cooperation will be noted." "Gregory, don't say a word," Victor yelled as officers moved to cuff him. "They have nothing on us." But they had everything. The surveillance equipment had recorded every word, every gesture, every damning admission. As Victor raised his hands to be cuffed, I felt the deep satisfaction of a complex project brought to a successful conclusion. "Sir, we'll need you to hand over those documents," an officer commanded. Victor's final act of defiance was to try and rip up the forged papers. Two officers quickly restrained him, preserving the evidence that would send him to federal prison. "These papers are a private family matter," he protested. "They are evidence in multiple felony cases across 3 states, Detective Reynolds corrected, carefully bagging each document for the chain of custody. Through my front window, I saw neighbors gathering on the sidewalk. Carl Jensen stood in his yard with his arms crossed, giving me a nod of approval. The quiet suburban street had become a crime scene, and the entire neighborhood was watching Victor's downfall. "Mr. Mills, for the record," Detective Reynolds said, "did these men attempt to fraudulently take ownership of your home using forged documents?" "Yes, Detective. They used fake signatures, a corrupt notary, and systematic intimidation." "He's lying." Victor's desperation was total. This was a legitimate arrangement. I was helping an elderly man who couldn't manage his own affairs. The irony was perfect. Victor's final defense was the very condescending attitude that had driven me to fight back. "The court will determine what was legitimate," Detective Reynolds replied, leading Victor in handcuffs toward the door. Gregory's cooperation began instantly. "Officers, I have information on other operations, other targets Victor was looking into. I want to help stop more crimes." "A wise decision, Mr. Nash," Detective Reynolds said. "Full cooperation might reduce your sentence from 15 years to 5. As the police cars were loaded, news vans started to arrive. Word had spread that a major fraud ring had been brought down by an elderly resident's detective work. "Mr. Mills," a reporter called out from behind the police tape, "how did you uncover this criminal operation?" 35 years as an architect taught me to analyze problems methodically," I replied. "When something doesn't add up, you investigate until it does." Detective Reynolds returned as the crowd began to thin. "Outstanding work, Mr. Mills. This arrest will close cases in 5 states. You've likely saved dozens of families from going through this. What's next? The trial will be in about 8 weeks. With your evidence and today's recordings, a conviction is all but guaranteed." She gave me her card. "The DA will want to discuss your testimony, but this case is rock solid." I looked at my house, finally safe again, no longer threatened by predators. The surveillance gear would be gone tomorrow, returning my home to normal. But I would never be the same man who had been blindsided by Victor's demand 3 weeks ago. "Detective Reynolds," I said, "thank you for believing an old man's suspicions were worth taking seriously." "Mr. Mills," she replied with sincere respect, "you didn't just save yourself. You stopped a career criminal who was destroying families across the country. That's something to be proud of." As the last police car drove down my quiet street, I knew that while this battle was over, the fight for justice was just beginning. Victor's trial would be the final chapter, but tonight, for the first time in weeks, I would sleep soundly in my own bed, in my own house, protected by my own mind and determination. 8 weeks after Victor's arrest, I walked up the steps of the King County Courthouse carrying the same briefcase that had helped secure his indictment. The May morning was bright, the sunshine warming my face as I prepared for the final act. Detective Reynolds was waiting at the entrance, smiling as I approached. "Ready for the conclusion, Mr. Mills?" she asked. "More than ready," I said, feeling the weight of justice in my hand. Inside, the courtroom was buzzing. Victor sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his arrogant demeanor gone, replaced by the vacant stare of a man facing a long prison sentence. Gregory Nash had already pleaded guilty in exchange for testifying against his former boss. But the most important person there was Claire, sitting in the front row behind the prosecution. She had filed for divorce the week of Victor's arrest, reclaiming her name and her life. When our eyes met, she gave me a smile filled with the same warmth I remembered from her childhood. Judge Allen Davies called the court to order. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here to determine the guilt or innocence of Victor Stone on charges of interstate fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and criminal conspiracy." The prosecutor's opening statement systematically detailed Victor's criminal empire: a dozen victims across 5 states, over $2 million in stolen assets, and a pattern of targeting the elderly through marriage fraud that spanned 3 years. "The evidence will show," the prosecutor finished, "that Victor Stone is not a simple opportunist, but a methodical predator who destroyed families for personal gain." Victor's lawyer tried to mitigate the damage. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client made mistakes, but he is not the criminal mastermind the prosecution is portraying. He was manipulated by others into these unfortunate circumstances." I almost scoffed. Even facing a lifetime behind bars, Victor could not take responsibility. The prosecution's case was a fortress of evidence. Victim after victim took the stand, telling the same story of Victor's methods: whirlwind romance, immediate housing pressure, forged documents, and family ruin. Isabella Rossi from Miami tearfully described losing the home she had lived in for 40 years. Samuel Lee from Austin spoke about the stress-induced heart attack he suffered after his eviction. Each story was identical, each family shattered by the same man. Then came the audio from Victor's own camera. The courtroom went silent as his voice filled the air. "The old man is completely unsuspecting. By the end of the month, the house will be ours." Victor's face fell as he heard his own words condemn him. There was no defense against a recorded confession. "Mr. Arthur Mills," the prosecutor called, "please take the stand." I walked to the witness box with a steady gait, feeling the responsibility not just for my own case, but for all the families Victor had harmed. "Mr. Mills, please describe the events of March 25th. The defendant came to my home with forged documents claiming I had sold my property," I stated clearly. "He demanded I vacate immediately and threatened to place me in a nursing home if I refused." "And how did you respond?" "I suggested we go to the police station, where I had already filed a report on his criminal history based on 3 weeks of my own investigation." Victor's attorney tried a cross-examination. "Mr. Mills, isn't it possible this was all just a family misunderstanding?" "Counselor," I replied, with an architect's precision, "systematic predators who target elderly victims across multiple states do not create misunderstandings. They create federal cases." A ripple of quiet laughter went through the courtroom. Even the judge cracked a smile. After 2 days of testimony, the jury took less than 3 hours to deliberate. The verdict was unanimous: guilty on all counts. Judge Davies' sentencing was decisive. "Mr. Stone, you have systematically preyed upon vulnerable citizens for your own enrichment. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison with full restitution owed to all your victims." Victor's knees buckled as the bailiff approached. The confident con man who had demanded my home 2 months ago was now a broken man facing over a decade behind bars. Gregory Nash received 5 years, with a chance of parole. His cooperation was noted, but not excused. Outside, Claire hugged me tightly. "Dad, I am so proud of how you protected not just us, but all those other families." "Sweetheart, you fell for someone who deceived professionals for years. That reflects your capacity to love, not poor judgment." "How can you forgive me for letting him into our lives?" "Because you are my daughter, and you deserve someone who values the incredible person you are." Detective Reynolds joined us on the steps. "Mr. Mills, your case will be taught at police academies. You've proven that age brings wisdom, not weakness." As Claire and I drove home, she reached over and squeezed my hand. "Dad, what will you do now?" I thought about volunteering for an elder fraud prevention group, about helping other victims, about using my analytical mind to solve problems beyond my own front door. "Whatever comes next," I said, "I know I can handle it." At 67, I had learned that protecting your family requires not just love, but strategic planning, careful preparation, and unyielding resolve. And sometimes that combination is exactly what justice needs. My house was safe, my daughter was healing, and Victor Stone would spend the next 12 years remembering the old man who refused to be his victim. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of the story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.